They say the worst betrayals happen on the best days. For Claire Hartford, it was Thanksgiving night. Her CEO husband forgot his phone on the table, unlocked. What she found in the next 60 seconds would cost her everything. Her $15 million penthouse, her trust fund, even her sanity. But here's the twist. He had no idea she used to be an award-winning investigative journalist. This is the true story of 72 hours that destroyed a marriage, exposed an $800 million fraud, and proved that sometimes the biggest mistake your enemy makes is underestimating you. Stay until the end, because the revenge, it's absolutely perfect. They say marriage is about trust. I trusted everything. That was my first mistake. My name is Claire Hartford, and 72 hours ago, I had the perfect life. A penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, a husband who made Forbes 40 under 40, a baby girl growing inside me, kicking against my ribs like she already knew she'd have to fight for everything. 72 hours ago, I believed in fairy tales. Now I'm sitting in a generic hotel room in Hartford, Connecticut, watching my entire existence unravel on a laptop screen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it started. Thanksgiving night. The Tribeca penthouse looked like something from Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows, catered dinner from 11 Madison Park, sitting untouched on our marble dining table. My husband Ryan checked his phone for the fifth time in 10 minutes, and I should have known then that something was catastrophically wrong. Ryan never wasted money on gestures that didn't serve a purpose. The $3,200 Thanksgiving dinner should have been my first clue. If you need to work, just go, I said, rubbing my 6-month pregnant belly. I'm used to it. Ryan barely looked up from his screen. What? No, it's just Singapore investors. The time difference, you know. It's Thanksgiving. Singapore has investors who celebrate American Thanksgiving? His jaw tightened, that micro expression I'd learned to recognize over 18 months of marriage. The one that meant I was asking questions he didn't want to answer. Claire, please. Not tonight. His phone buzzed on the table between us. He grabbed it quickly, but I'd already seen the contact name lighting up the screen. V. Pierce, office, Vanessa Pierce, his VP of marketing, the one he described as brilliant but cold when I'd met her at the company Christmas party last year. The one who'd looked at me with something I couldn't quite identify, pity, maybe, or satisfaction. Ryan stood abruptly. Actually, you're right. I should handle this. Conference call in 20 minutes. On Thanksgiving night, Ryan, I'll be back in 2 hours, 3, tops. He grabbed his coat, kissed my forehead with the perfunctory affection of someone checking off a task list. Save me some pie. The door closed. I sat alone in the perfect apartment, hand on my belly, staring at the untouched feast. 2,800 square feet of prime Manhattan real estate that my parents had left me. The last piece of them I had left after the car accident 5 years ago. Then I saw it. His phone, still on the table, face up, unlocked. Ryan never forgot his phone. In 3 years of knowing him, I'd never seen him more than 6 feet from that device. He slept with it on the nightstand. He took it into the bathroom. He checked it at red lights. My journalist instincts kicked in before my marriage vows could stop me. 12 years of investigative reporting don't just disappear because you hang up your press credentials and play housewife. The phone lit up with another text notification. Vanessa Pierce. Coast clear? I'm at the Peninsula. Room 1804. Don't bring your phone this time. I want you focused on US, not her. I stared at those words for 30 seconds. Maybe longer. Time does strange things when your entire reality shifts beneath your feet. I could have put the phone down. I could have confronted Ryan when he came home. I could have done 1,000 things differently. Instead, I picked up the phone and started reading. I told myself I'd just look at that one message, confirm what it was, find an innocent explanation. Work crisis, misunderstanding, anything but what my gut already knew. I was a journalist for 12 years. I'd exposed medical device companies that killed patients. I'd interviewed serial killers and corrupt politicians. I knew how to recognize a lie. I looked anyway. The text thread with Vanessa went back 6 months. Hotel confirmations, Peninsula, 4 Seasons, even the Hamptons house, my family's house. The one where my parents had taught me to sail. Photos. Ryan and Vanessa in bed. My bed. I recognized the headboard my mother had commissioned from a craftsman in Vermont. One photo had a caption, "Can't wait till we don't have to hide anymore. February can't come soon enough." February, 3 months away, 6 weeks after my due date. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I opened his email app. Still logged in, Ryan's fatal flaw. He trusted technology implicitly and people not at all. The email to Marcus Steinberg, Esquire. Subject line, post-nuptial agreement, final draft. Dated November 15th. 2 weeks ago, I read it 3 times. Then 4. The words didn't change. Marcus, attached, is the revised post-nup C signed last month. Key changes per our discussion. 1. Penthouse transfers to my name, citing estate tax efficiency for the baby's trust. She didn't read the fine print. 2. Her trust fund remains separate, but I'm named successor trustee if she's deemed incapacitated. Postpartum mental health clause. You'll activate this post-birth. 3. Settlement upon divorce. $750,000, down from $8 million. She initialed every page while watching Netflix. Timeline. File February 10th, 6 weeks post-birth when she'll be sleep-deprived and won't fight. Full custody using mental health documentation from Dr. Patricia Wells. V moves into penthouse February 14th. Poetic, no? The phone slipped from my hands onto the marble floor. The sound echoed through the empty apartment like a gunshot. I crawled to the bathroom. Made it to the toilet before I vomited up $3,200 worth of artisanal Thanksgiving dinner. When I could breathe again, I looked at myself in the mirror, 6 months pregnant, 34 years old. Former Pulitzer-nominated journalist who'd given up her career because her husband said he wanted a partner who could be present for their family. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. But then something shifted in my reflection. The shock hardened into something else, something familiar. I wasn't just a pregnant housewife. I was an investigative journalist. And Ryan had just handed me the biggest story of my life. I walked back to where his phone lay on the floor, picked it up, opened the camera app, and I started documenting everything. Ryan came home at 11:47. He smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. His collar was slightly rumpled. He had the satisfied look of a man who'd just closed a major deal. "Sorry that ran long," he said, all charm and apology. "Singapore investors are brutal. You save me any—" He stopped. I was sitting at the dining table, his phone in front of me. The silence stretched like taffy. I watched him calculate, watched him run through options, watched him choose. "You went through my phone." His voice had changed. The warmth evaporated, replaced by something cold and flat. "You forgot it," I said. My own voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. I saw Vanessa's text, then I saw everything else. Ryan sat down across from me. He didn't look angry or panicked. He looked almost relieved. "Okay," he said. "So you know that you've been planning to divorce me, steal my apartment, have me declared mentally ill so you can take my inheritance?" I wouldn't use the word steal, and the postnup you signed is legally binding. "I signed it because you said it was to protect the baby's trust." "Lower your voice. You're being hysterical. This is exactly what I'm talking about, is your emotional instability." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, it almost worked. Almost. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't you dare gaslight me right now." Ryan leaned back in his chair, the pose of a man completely in control. "Claire, be realistic. You have no income, no career. You gave that up. Your choice, by the way. This penthouse? The postnup transferred it to marital property. My lawyers drafted it. Your signature is on 12 pages. This apartment was my parents', was, past tense. Now it's ours. And when we divorce, the prenup dictates asset division. You'll get the settlement, $750,000. That's generous. Generous? My trust fund alone is worth $14 million, which you'll retain. I'm not greedy, Claire." He smiled, actually smiled. "But the penthouse, the company shares you received as wedding gifts, the joint accounts, those are marital assets. You'll be fine. You'll get the settlement, we'll co-parent, and you can move on. And if I fight you? The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. Then I released Dr. Wells's psychiatric evaluations, Ryan said softly. The ones documenting your anxiety, depression, and concerning statements about not being sure you can handle motherhood. I petition for full custody on mental health grounds. I freeze your access to joint accounts pending litigation. And I make sure every journalist you used to work with knows why Claire Hartford really quit her job. She had a breakdown and was asked to leave. I couldn't breathe. That's not true. None of that is true. Oh, doesn't matter. He stood up. What matters is what I can prove in court. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to calm down. Think about what's best for our child, and tomorrow we'll have a civil conversation about next steps. He walked toward the guest bedroom, paused at the door. Oh, and Claire, I changed the passcode on my phone. I won't make that mistake again. The door closed. I sat frozen in the dark apartment, hand on my belly, tears streaming silently down my face. That's when I realized I wasn't fighting a divorce. I was fighting for my survival, and I had 72 hours before he made his next move. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. My brain had shifted into the mode I hadn't used in 18 months, the one that had won me investigative journalism awards and nearly gotten me killed twice. Research, document, plan, execute. At 5:47 in the morning, Ryan emerged from the guest bedroom in his running gear, Brooks running shoes, Patagonia jacket, the uniform of the conscientious tech CEO. I'm doing my Central Park loop, he said casually, like we hadn't just blown up our entire marriage 6 hours earlier. We'll talk when I'm back, civilly. I looked up from my laptop, made my voice small, defeated. Okay. The moment the door closed, I moved. First call, David Morrison, senior partner at Morrison and Associates, the lawyer who'd managed my parents' estate, my father's best friend, the only person in the world I still trusted completely. David, I need you to tell me the exact legal status of this penthouse. Claire, it's 6 in the morning. David, please. Something in my voice stopped his protest. The penthouse was part of your parents' estate. It transferred to you 5 years ago. Title is in your name. Sole ownership. Ryan says I signed a postnup that made it marital property. The pause was long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. Impossible. Separate property acquired before marriage can't be converted without explicit deed transfer. What exactly did you sign? A trust restructuring document last month. He said it was for estate tax purposes. Send me that document. Now. Second call, Elena Cortez, my former partner at the investigative unit, the one who'd covered my back during the medical device story when the company's lawyers tried to intimidate us into silence. Now at the Washington Post. Elena, remember the encrypted server we used for the medical device investigation? Claire Hartford. I could hear the smile in her voice. Haven't heard from you in 18 months. What happened to domestic bliss? It was a lie. I need help. I have files to upload, financial documents, recordings. I need them stored somewhere they can't be subpoenaed or hacked. The smile disappeared from her voice. How bad is this? He's trying to take everything. My home, my money, my baby. Send me everything. I'll set up a secure drop. She paused. And Claire, when this is over, you are writing this story. Third call, premium moving and storage. I need a full pack and move. Today, everything goes into climate-controlled storage under a business entity name, not my personal name. Ma'am, we typically require 48 hours. I'll pay triple your rate, cash, today. Money talks. It always does. I'll send a crew by noon. At 8:37, David called back. I could hear the anger in his voice, the controlled fury of a man who'd spent 40 years practicing law and thought he had seen every dirty trick. Claire, I've reviewed the document you sent. This is fraud. What? The post-it-up claims to restructure the Hartford Family Trust, but actually transfers the penthouse deed to Ryan's name, buried on page 9 in legal jargon designed to look like standard tax language. This would never hold up in court. It's textbook financial coercion. My hands were shaking again. Can I sell the apartment? Right now? Legally, yes. You're still the deed holder of record. But Claire, how fast? If you're willing to accept below market value, I know a private equity buyer who specializes in quick closings. All cash. Could close by Monday. Do it. I'll take 20 cents on the dollar. I just need liquidity and I need it fast. Claire, what are you planning? I'm disappearing, David, and I need to do it before Ryan realizes what's happening. The moving crew arrived at noon, professional, efficient. They didn't ask questions when I told them to pack everything except Ryan's closet and office. I watched them disassemble the nursery, the crib I'd spent 3 weeks choosing, the mobile with hand-painted woodland creatures, the rocking chair that had been my mother's, each piece wrapped in paper and loaded into boxes. My entire life reduced to cardboard and bubble wrap. By 4 o'clock, the apartment was empty except for Ryan's belongings. I stood in the echoing space, hand on my belly, and let myself feel it for exactly 60 seconds. This apartment held every memory I had of my parents. Christmas mornings, my high school graduation party, the night they'd told me about the brain cancer that would kill my mother 18 months later. The afternoon my father's lawyer called to say he'd driven into a tree 3 months after Mom died. Some people called it an accident. I knew better, but I couldn't let Ryan have it. Some prices are too high, even for memories. Ryan came home at 6:15. I'd timed it perfectly, late enough that the moving truck was gone, early enough that he'd see what I'd done in daylight. I heard his key in the lock, heard his footsteps stop in the entryway. Claire? I was sitting on the floor of the empty living room. The only furniture left was the dining table and chairs, technically his, purchased after we married. He walked through the apartment, kitchen empty, living room empty, bedroom empty, nursery empty. When he came back, his face was white with rage. Where is everything? Storage. You can't just... He stopped, recalculated. Claire, I understand you're upset, but this is irrational. Is it? I stood up slowly, one hand supporting my lower back. 6 months pregnant made everything harder. You're planning to take this apartment in the divorce. I'm just making sure that doesn't happen. The postnup is fraud. I spoke to my attorney this morning. The real one, not the guy you paid to pretend to represent both of us. Ryan's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. No, I made a mistake 18 months ago when I married you. I'm fixing it now. I walked past him toward the door, had my purse over my shoulder, had already packed a suitcase that morning and hidden it in the building's storage room. Where are you going? Away from you. Claire, if you leave, I'll report you missing. You're pregnant, unstable. I'll have every cop in New York looking for you. I turned back, smiled. Then I guess you better be really careful about what you say to them, because I have recordings, emails, text messages, all backed up in multiple locations. If anything happens to me, it all goes to the press and the SEC and the Manhattan DA. For the first time since I'd known him, Ryan looked genuinely uncertain. You're bluffing. Try me. I left. Walked out of the apartment where I'd lived my entire childhood. Took the elevator down 32 floors for the last time, and I didn't look back. The extended stay hotel in Hartford, Connecticut wasn't much to look at. Generic furniture, beige walls, the kind of place where people stayed when they were between lives. Perfect. I checked in under Elizabeth Morgan, my mother's maiden name, paid cash for 2 weeks. The clerk didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. For 5 days, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Free. David called Monday morning. The sale closed. After taxes and expedite fees, you're netting $6.8 million. Transfer it to the offshore account we discussed, Cayman Islands, under the LLC. Claire, I have to advise against David. Ryan's lawyers will freeze my domestic accounts the second he realizes I'm gone. I need money he can't touch. He sighed, the sound of a man who knew I was right and hated it. Done, the funds are secured. What about you? Where are you going? It's better if you don't know. Attorney-client privilege only protects so much. I'd thought of everything. New phone, no social media, medical records transferred to Hartford Hospital's OBGYN department. Under my new name, I disappeared completely, or so I thought. Wednesday morning, 5 days after Thanksgiving, I woke up feeling almost normal. The baby kicked. I rubbed my belly and actually smiled. Just you and me, little one, I whispered. We're safe now. I opened my laptop, searched my own name out of curiosity. The first result made my blood freeze. New York Post, CEO Ryan Hartford reports, wife missing. Pregnant woman vanished after Thanksgiving. I clicked with shaking hands. The article opened with a photo. Ryan at a press conference, looking devastated, holding a framed picture of me. The photo from our wedding. Me in white lace, smiling like I believed in happy endings. Tech CEO Ryan Hartford held a tearful press conference Tuesday, begging for information about his missing wife, Claire Hartford, 34, who is 6 months pregnant with the couple's first child. Claire has been struggling with prenatal depression, Hartford told reporters. She left our home Friday without explanation. Her phone is off. We're desperate to know she's safe. Hartford has offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to her location. Anyone with knowledge of Claire Hartford's whereabouts is urged to contact NYPD immediately. I read it 3 times. Then I watched the video. Ryan looked perfect, devastated but composed, vulnerable but strong. The worried husband, the protective father-to-be. Claire, if you are watching this, he said, looking directly into the camera, please come home. We love you. We want to help you. Whatever you're going through, we can face it together. I wanted to vomit or scream or both. He was rewriting the narrative, making me the unstable wife who'd fled her loving husband, and I'd walked right into his trap. My phone rang. David Morrison. Claire, where are you? I told you it's better if NYPD issued a silver alert. Ryan filed a missing persons report claiming you're mentally unstable and a danger to yourself and the baby. That's insane. I'm fine. He has documentation. Dr. Patricia Wells submitted an affidavit saying you've exhibited signs of prenatal psychosis, made statements about wanting to disappear, and missed your last 2 psychiatric appointments. I stopped seeing her 3 weeks ago because she was reporting everything to Ryan. Can you prove that? Silence. That's what I thought, David said. Claire, there's more. Ryan filed an emergency petition in family court. He's seeking temporary custody of the baby upon birth and a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation of you. He can't do that. The baby isn't even born. He's citing imminent risk to the child based on your disappearance and mental health history. The hearing is Friday. If you don't appear, he wins by default. If I appear, he'll have me committed. Then we need to prove he's lying. Can you do that? I thought about the recordings, the emails, the evidence I'd collected that night in the penthouse. Yes, I said slowly, but I need 48 hours. You have until Friday morning. Make it count. I called Elena. I need you to run a story. Friday morning. Before the custody hearing. What story? Ryan Hartford's company is built on fraud. The IPO documents claim 12 million active users. The real number is 4.7 million. He's been buying fake accounts to inflate metrics for investors. How do you know this? Because I have his internal financial documents, the ones he stupidly left on his laptop at home. I photographed them the night I found his phone. Elena was quiet for a moment. Claire, if I publish this without verification, I'll give you 3 corroborating sources. Former employees he laid off when they questioned the numbers. I already contacted them. This will destroy his IPO. That's the idea. He's trying to take my baby by painting me as crazy. I'm going to prove he's a criminal. When can you get me the sources? Tonight. I spent the next 24 hours rebuilding my case. Called in every favor I'd earned during 12 years as an investigative journalist. Thomas Reed, former CFO of Safeguard Systems. Fired 8 months ago. Ryan asked me to falsify user data for investor presentations, he told me. When I refused, he accused me of embezzlement. I lost everything fighting his lawyers. But if you're finally taking him down, I'll testify to anything. Rachel Kim, former head of analytics, quit 6 months ago. The user numbers were fake, we all knew. But when I sent a memo to the board, Ryan had me escorted out by security and threatened to sue me for breach of contract if I talked. I've been waiting for someone to have the guts to expose him. James Porter, early investor, sold his shares last year. I got suspicious when the metrics didn't match independent audits. When I asked Ryan about it, he bought me out at a premium and made me sign an NDA. But if he's defrauding new investors, that NDA is void. I'm in. By Thursday night, Elena had everything she needed. Claire, this is a federal securities fraud case. This is huge. Then write it. I want it published 6 a.m. Friday, before the custody hearing. Consider it done. I hung up, looked around the generic hotel room. 36 hours ago, I thought I was safe, thought distance and new identity would protect me. But Ryan had lawyers, money, and a system designed to believe powerful men over desperate women. So I'd fight him with the only weapon I had left, the truth. Thursday night, 11:43 p.m. My burner phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Claire, it's Vanessa Pierce. I froze. How did you get this number? I'm the VP of marketing for a tech company. Finding people is what I do. What do you want? Her voice was shaking. To warn you, Ryan knows where you are. My heart stopped. What? He tracked your medical records transfer. He knows you're in Hartford. He's driving there tonight with his lawyer. They're planning to have you involuntarily committed under Connecticut's emergency psychiatric hold laws. Once you're in a facility, he'll petition for guardianship and control of your assets. I stood up, started throwing things into my bag. Why are you telling me this? You're in on the whole plan, she was crying. Because I just found out I'm not the only affair. There's another woman, Ryan's assistant. He's been playing all of us. And when I confronted him about the fraud allegations, he threatened me. Said if I don't back up his story about you being an unstable, he'll claim I seduced him and blackmailed him. He'll destroy my career. So you want me to feel sorry for you? No, I want you to know I'm willing to testify against him. I have emails, recordings. He admitted the user fraud to me, bragged about it. I stopped packing. Why would you do that? Because I just realized I'm not his partner. I'm his next victim. And I don't want to end up like you. Or worse. How much time do I have? 2 hours, maybe 3. He left Manhattan at 7 p.m. I hung up, looked around the hotel room that had been my sanctuary for 5 days. I'd been naive again. Thought distance would protect me. Thought evidence would save me. But Ryan had everything on his side, and he was 2 hours away from taking my freedom. I called David Morrison. David, I need you to file an emergency counter petition tonight. On what grounds? Domestic abuse, financial coercion, fraud, and attempted kidnapping. I have witnesses, I have evidence, and I have a Washington Post reporter who's publishing Ryan's financial crimes in 6 hours. Claire, if you're wrong about any of this, I'm not. File it and send a copy to the family court judge. I'm not running anymore. I grabbed my bag, left the hotel through the service entrance, caught a train back to New York. If Ryan wanted a war, I'd give Adam one, but I'd fight it on my terms, in public, where he couldn't make me disappear. The Washington Post published at 6:02 Friday morning. I was sitting in a 24-hour diner in Manhattan when my phone lit up with Elena's text. It's live. Good luck today. I opened the article on my laptop. Headline: Safeguard Systems CEO Ryan Hartford accused of securities fraud ahead of $800 million IPO. By Elena Cortez. Federal investigators have opened a probe into Safeguard Systems after whistleblowers allege CEO Ryan Hartford systematically inflated user metrics to defraud investors. According to internal documents obtained by the Post, Safeguard claimed 12 million active users in IPO filings. Former employees say the real number is less than 5 million, with the remainder purchased from bot farms. Ryan Hartford personally ordered me to falsify analytics reports, said Thomas Reed, former CFO. When I refused, he fired me and threatened legal action to keep me silent. The allegations come as Hartford is embroiled in a contentious custody dispute with his estranged wife, Claire Hartford, whom he reported missing last week. Sources close to the case say Claire Hartford is cooperating with investigators and has provided financial records corroborating the fraud claims. Safeguard's IPO, scheduled for January 15th, has been suspended pending SEC investigation. Hartford faces potential federal charges. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop and ordered breakfast. For the first time in a week, I was hungry. Family Court, Manhattan, 9 a.m. The gallery was packed with reporters. Word had spread fast. Missing pregnant wife surfaces at custody hearing on same-day fraud allegations break. This was the kind of story that made careers. Ryan sat with his legal team, 3 attorneys in suits that probably cost more than most people's cars. Marcus Steinberg led the group, silver-haired, distinguished, the kind of lawyer who made juries trust him instinctively. Ryan looked pale, tired. The press conference version of himself had cracked. I walked in alone, 6 months pregnant, carrying a single folder. No lawyer beside me. Every head turned. Judge Patricia Anderson entered, 50-something. No nonsense expression. Former prosecutor. I'd done my research. We're here for an emergency custody petition filed by Mr. Ryan Hartford, she said. Mr. Steinberg, you may begin. Marcus stood. Your Honor, my client's wife has been missing for 8 days. She's 6 months pregnant, has a documented history of mental instability, and liquidated marital assets without consent. The courtroom doors opened. David Morrison strode in, slightly out of breath. Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Hartford is not missing. She's sitting right there, and the assets in question were her separate property. Judge Anderson raised an eyebrow. Mr. Morrison, you're late. Apologies, Your Honor. I was filing a counter petition on behalf of my client. Mrs. Hartford is seeking a restraining order against her husband for domestic abuse, financial coercion, and attempted unlawful confinement. The gallery erupted. Whispers, camera clicks, a reporter in the back row frantically typing. Order! Judge Anderson's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Steinberg? Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Good. Your Honor, these allegations are absurd. My client is the victim here. Is he also the victim of a federal securities fraud investigation? David asked. Because that story broke this morning. Judge Anderson looked at Ryan. Mr. Hartford, are you under criminal investigation? Ryan's face was white. That's a baseless accusation by disgruntled ex-employees. I stood up. Your Honor, may I speak? Mrs. Hartford, you're not represented. I'm representing myself. I was an investigative journalist for 12 years. I know how to present evidence. Judge Anderson studied me for a long moment. I could see her calculating. Pregnant woman, missing for over a week, no lawyer, either completely unhinged or telling the truth. Proceed. I walked to the front of the courtroom, opened my folder. Every eye in the room was on me. Your Honor, my husband claims I'm mentally unstable, but the psychiatrist who diagnosed me, Dr. Patricia Wells, was paid directly by my husband. Here's a check from Ryan Hartford's personal account to her practice, $15,000, dated the day after my first appointment. I handed the document to the bailiff. Watched Judge Anderson's expression shift as she read it. He claims I liquidated marital assets, I continued. But the penthouse I sold was inherited from my parents. It was never marital property. Here's the original deed. My name, sole ownership. Another document. Judge Anderson took it, compared it to something in Ryan's filing. He claims I disappeared and am a danger to my child, but I left because he was planning to have me declared incompetent so he could steal my $14 million trust fund. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the courtroom's audio system. David had arranged that this morning. This is a voice memo from Ryan's phone, recorded November 20th. I pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the courtroom. Memo to self, talk to Marcus today. Everything's in motion. Claire signed the post-it note without reading. Pregnancy brain is real. Laughter on the recording. I watched the real Ryan's face turn gray. The recording continued. The mental health angle is perfect. Dr. Wells has been documenting her anxiety and mood instability for 6 months. It'll hold up in court. The timing is critical. IPO closes January 15th. I'll be worth $340 million personally. Can't have her claiming half in a divorce. This way, she gets the settlement I decide, and I get the company, the penthouse, and Vanessa. More of his voice. The baby, joint custody, but primary with me. I'll be the stable parent, the successful CE. She'll be the unstable ex-wife. who couldn't handle motherhood. It's almost too easy. She gave up her career. She has no income, no leverage. I stopped the recording. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. There's more, I said quietly, but I think Your Honor gets the idea. Judge Anderson looked at Ryan. Her expression had shifted from neutral to something harder. Mr. Hartford, is that your voice? That recording was obtained illegally. That's not what I asked. Is that your voice? Ryan's jaw worked. Yes, but it's taken out of context. There's no context where planning to have your pregnant wife committed to steal her inheritance is acceptable, Your Honor, I said. Judge Anderson set down the papers. Mr. Hartford, I'm dismissing your custody petition. Furthermore, I'm granting Mrs. Hartford's request for a restraining order. You are to have no contact with her pending a full hearing on her allegations. Marcus tried to salvage it. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. You do that. But right now, get your client out of my courtroom before I hold him in contempt. Ryan stood. For a moment, he just stared at me, pure hatred in his eyes. You think you've won? He said quietly. But the courtroom was silent enough that everyone heard. You just destroyed your own life. No one will touch you after this. I met his gaze steadily. I didn't destroy anything, Ryan. I just stopped letting you destroy me. Court officers moved toward him. He left without another word. I stood there, hand on my pregnant belly, trying not to shake. David touched my shoulder. You did it. Did I? Because even as reporters mobbed me outside the courtroom, even as I gave a brief statement about financial abuse and coercive control, I knew this wasn't over. Ryan didn't lose. He regrouped and came back harder. I just didn't know how much harder yet. 3 weeks later, I sat in a generic Brooklyn apartment I'd rented month to month. 1 bedroom. Street noise at night. Radiator that clanked like it was possessed. Different world from the Tribeca penthouse. My laptop was open. News articles covered the screen like battle scars. Safeguard systems, files for bankruptcy. Investors sue CEO. Ryan Hartford indicted on 12 counts of securities fraud. Tech wives speak out. Financial abuse in Silicon Alley. The story had grown bigger than I'd expected. Other women had come forward. Other wives of tech CEOs who'd signed documents they didn't understand, who'd given up careers at their husbands' requests, who'd found themselves with nothing when the marriages ended. My phone rang. David Morrison. Claire, we need to talk about your finances. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What's wrong? Ryan's bankruptcy filing lists you as a creditor. His legal team is arguing that the penthouse sale proceeds were fraudulently transferred. But you said the sale was legal. It was. But Ryan's declaring bankruptcy means all his assets, including contested ones, are frozen. The bankruptcy trustee is demanding you return the $6.8 million pending litigation. I stood up, started pacing the small apartment. I don't have it anymore. I paid your legal fees, the moving and storage, medical bills. How much is left? I closed my eyes. About $400,000. The silence on the line was deafening. Claire, I'm sorry. This could take years to resolve. You might get your money back eventually, but right now, I'm broke, and I have a baby coming in 2 weeks. I hung up, sat on the floor of the empty apartment. No furniture, still in storage that I couldn't afford to move out. No nursery setup, no savings. The baby kicked hard, like she was reminding me she was still there, still counting on me. I'm so sorry, I whispered, hand on my belly. I tried to protect you. I thought if I fought hard enough, I could give you the life I had. The safe one, the privileged one. But I lost everything. Another kick, harder this time. I laughed through tears. Okay, you're right. We're alive. That's not nothing. Have you ever lost everything and realized it wasn't the end? Sometimes we spend so much energy protecting the life we think we're supposed to have that we miss the one we actually need. I wiped my eyes, opened my laptop, started writing. If I couldn't give my daughter money or a penthouse, I'd give her the truth. I'd write this story, all of it, every detail, and maybe, just maybe, I'd stop one other woman from signing documents she didn't read. 2 weeks later, I went into labor. Brooklyn Methodist Hospital, delivery room, no husband, no family. But Elena was there, my friend, my former partner, the one who'd believed me when no one else did. "You're doing great," she said, holding my hand through a contraction. "Almost there." The pain was unbelievable, like my body was being ripped apart. But I'd been through worse in the past month. "One more push," the doctor said. I pushed, screamed, pushed again, and then crying, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "It's a girl," the doctor said, "healthy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. They placed her on my chest. Tiny, perfect, looking at me with dark eyes that seemed to see everything. "Hi, Emma," I whispered. "Hi, it's just you and me now, but I promise I will never let anyone make you feel small. I will teach you to read contracts, to trust your instincts, to fight back." Elena was crying too. "She's lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have her." Because the truth was, Ryan had tried to take everything. My home, my money, my reputation, my freedom, but he couldn't take this. This moment, this life I'd created, this was mine. Emma was 6 months old when the book deal came through. I'd been writing at night after she fell asleep, writing during her naps, writing in 20-minute bursts between feedings and diaper changes. The manuscript was raw, honest, every detail of what Ryan had done. The posting-up fraud, the mental health manipulation, the systematic financial abuse. I'd titled it The CEO's Wife, How I Exposed My Husband's Empire of Lies. Literary agents had rejected it at first. Too controversial, too risky. Ryan's lawyers were still fighting the bankruptcy, and no one wanted to be sued. Then Elena published a follow-up article, "The Woman Who Took Down a Tech Empire, Claire Hartford's Story." Suddenly, every agent in New York wanted to represent me. I chose the one who didn't try to soften the story, who understood that this wasn't just about Ryan. It was about every woman who'd ever signed something she didn't understand, who'd given up her career for a man's ambition, who'd been called crazy for seeing the truth. The advance was $200,000, not enough to replace what I'd lost, but enough to move into a better apartment, enough to pay David's remaining legal fees, enough to breathe. Ryan's trial started that fall. I attended every day of testimony, sat in the back of the courtroom with Emma in a carrier, took notes like I was still a journalist covering a story. Thomas Reed testified about the falsified user data. Rachel Kim described the culture of fraud at Safeguard. James Porter explained how Ryan had bought his silence, and Vanessa Pierce took the stand. She looked different, smaller somehow, no longer the confident VP I'd seen at that Christmas party. "Mr. Hartford told me the company had 12 million active users," she testified. "He showed me analytics reports. I believed him because I had no reason not to. When I started questioning the numbers, he threatened to destroy my career if I told anyone." The prosecutor asked, "Did he ever discuss his wife with you?" Vanessa's hands shook. "Yes, he said she was mentally unstable, that she was making false accusations, that she needed psychiatric help." "Did you believe him?" Long pause. "Yes, until I realized he was saying the same things about me." When Ryan's defense attorney cross-examined her, he tried to paint her as a scorned mistress, a woman seeking revenge. But Vanessa had receipts, emails, text messages, recordings. She'd learned from watching me. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all 12 counts. Ryan showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just sat there perfectly still, like he couldn't believe this was happening. The sentencing came 3 weeks later. I was there for that too. Judge Malcolm Rivers looked at Ryan with something close to disgust. "Mr. Hartford, you had every advantage. Education, wealth, opportunity. And you used those advantages to defraud investors and abuse your wife. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison." 12 years. Emma would be 13 when he got out. She wouldn't remember him. That thought should have made me sad. It didn't. The book published 6 months after the trial. I was terrified. What if no one bought it? What if people didn't believe me? What if Ryan's lawyers found some way to sue despite everything? The first week, it sold 20,000 copies. By the second week, it hit the New York Times bestseller list. By the third week, I was doing interviews on every major network. Your book has sparked a national conversation about financial abuse. The Today Show host said, "What do you want readers to know?" I thought about that question, about everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. That leaving isn't weakness, I said. Fighting back isn't vindictive, and surviving isn't the same as winning. But it's enough. The clip went viral. Women shared it with captions like this, and finally someone said it. I started getting messages, hundreds of them. Women who'd read the book and recognized their own lives. Who'd sign in post-nups they didn't understand. Who'd been told they were crazy when they questioned their husband's finances. Some of them left. Some of them got lawyers. Some of them just needed to know they weren't alone. That's what the book became. Not just my story, our story. Emma took her first steps on a Tuesday afternoon. We were in our apartment, the new one, with 2 bedrooms and windows that actually opened. I'd been reading on the couch while she played on her mat. She pulled herself up on the coffee table, looked at me, let go. 3 wobbly steps before she fell on her bottom. I scooped her up, laughing and crying at the same time. "You did it, you brilliant, brave girl, you did it." She giggled, reached for my face with her tiny hands. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about Ryan or the trial or the money I'd lost. I was just here, present, whole. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like myself again. Not the journalist I'd been, not the wife I'd tried to be. Just me. Claire Hartford, mother, survivor, writer. Enough. 2 years after Emma was born, I started teaching. Columbia Journalism School offered me a position as an adjunct professor. Ethics in Investigative Reporting. One class, Thursday afternoons. Perfect timing. Emma was in daycare and I could write in the mornings. My students were young, hungry. They reminded me of who I'd been before Ryan, before the penthouse and the prenatal yoga and the slow erosion of everything I'd believed about myself. Journalism isn't just about finding the truth, I told them on the first day. It's about telling it when it's hard, when it costs you something, when people you love tell you to stay quiet. A student raised her hand. "Is that what you did with your ex-husband?" I'd expected the question. The book had made me semi-famous, or infamous, depending who you asked. Yes, and it cost me everything I thought I wanted, but it gave me everything I actually needed. "How do you know the difference?" Another student asked. Good question. You don't, not until later. That's what makes it hard. The book sold 2 million copies in its first year. Foreign rights sold in 32 countries. Netflix bought the documentary rights. The money was surreal. Not penthouse and trust fund money, but enough. Enough to stop worrying about rent. Enough to take Emma to the park without calculating the cost of a coffee after. David helped me set up proper financial protections this time. Trusts, legal structures that no future partner could touch. "I'm not getting married again," I told him. "That's what everyone says." And then, "David, I'm not." He just smiled. "We'll see." But I meant it. I'd learned my lesson about trusting someone else with my security, about signing documents I didn't read, about giving up my career for someone's vision of what a wife should be. Emma would grow up watching me work, watching me build something that belonged to me. That was the legacy I wanted to leave her. Not money, not property, independence. Ryan wrote me from prison. The letter came 3 years after his sentencing. Federal Correctional Institution, Otisville. Medium security. I almost threw it away unopened. Almost. "Claire, I know you probably won't read this. I wouldn't, in your place. But I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. Not for losing everything. I'm sorry for what I did to you. You were right about everything. The fraud, the manipulation, the plan to have you committed, all of it. Prison gives you time to think. Too much time. And I've realized that I destroyed the only person who ever really saw me. The journalist who could have been my partner. Instead, I tried to make you small enough that I'd feel big. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know you were always smarter than me. I just couldn't admit it. The baby, Emma, I saw her name in an article. She's lucky to have you. Ryan, I read it twice, then I put it in a drawer. Not because I forgave him, I didn't, but because it was proof. Proof that I'd been right, that I wasn't crazy, that everything I'd fought for had been real. Sometimes that's all you need. Validation from the person who tried to gaslight you into believing you were wrong. I never wrote back. Emma started kindergarten. I stood outside the school on her first day, watching her march through the doors with her backpack and her lunchbox and her complete lack of fear. "She'll be fine," another mother said, noticing my expression. I know. That's what scares me. Because Emma was fearless in ways I'd never been at her age. She asked questions. She challenged teachers when something didn't make sense. She refused to do things just because someone told her to. I'd done that, raised her to think for herself, to trust her own judgment. But watching her walk away from me into that building, I felt the weight of it, the responsibility of teaching a child that the world won't always keep her safe, that she'll have to fight for herself, that sometimes the people who say they love you are the ones you have to run from. She came home that afternoon with paint on her dress and a drawing of our apartment. "This is home," she said, pointing to stick figures. "That's you. That's me. That's our family." Just the two of us. No one else. Perfect. When Netflix released the documentary, I made Emma stay with Elena for the premiere. "I don't want you seeing this yet," I told her. She was 5, too young to understand what her father had done, what I'd survived. "Why not?" "Because some stories, you're grown-up stories. I'll tell you when you're ready." She frowned. "You always say I'm brave." "You are, but brave doesn't mean you have to see everything right now." The documentary was raw. Interviews with me, with Elena, with the whistleblowers who testified at Ryan's trial, recordings of the custody hearing, photos of the empty penthouse after I'd sold everything. They'd titled it The Perfect Lie. Critics loved it. Searing examination of financial abuse. Hartford's story exposes the dark side of startup culture. Required viewing. The comments online were mixed. Some people called me a hero. Others called me a gold digger who destroyed a successful man's career. I stopped reading after the first day. The documentary sparked legislative changes. 5 states passed laws requiring separate legal representation in postnuptial agreements. New York created a registry for domestic financial abuse. Stanford Business School added ethics training about power dynamics in relationships. Small victories. Not enough to undo what happened to me, but enough to protect other women. I testified before a Senate committee about financial coercion. "The abuse doesn't always leave bruises," I said. "Sometimes it's buried in page 9 of a legal document. Sometimes it's a psychiatrist on your husband's payroll. Sometimes it's being called unstable when you ask to see the bank statements." A senator asked, "What would have helped you earlier?" Someone believing me, someone saying, "Check before you sign, get your own lawyer. Your instincts are right." Just one person in my corner who wasn't on his payroll. The hearing was broadcast on C-SPAN. Boring, technical, policy-focused. But I got 300 messages that night from women who'd watched it, who'd seen themselves in my story, who'd started making their own plans to leave. That's why I kept telling it. Not for revenge, not for fame, for them. Ryan was up for parole after 8 years. I attended the hearing. David tried to talk me out of it. "You don't need to do this, Claire. You've moved on. Let it go." I need to look him in the eye one more time. Make sure he knows I'm still here. The parole boardroom was small, institutional. Ryan sat at a table in prison khakis, looking older, grayer, smaller than I remembered. He didn't look at me during his statement. "I've used my time here productively," he said. "Completed addiction counseling, anger management, business ethics courses. I've reflected deeply on my actions and the harm I caused." The chairman asked, "Do you take responsibility for your crimes?" "Yes, completely. I defrauded investors. I manipulated financial documents. I hurt people who trusted me." "What about your ex-wife?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "I hurt her most of all. I tried to control her, gaslight her, take everything she had. And I'm sorry." Then he looked at me. Finally. "Claire, I know you'll never forgive me. I'm not asking you to. I just want you to know that I understand now what I couldn't see then. You were always the strong one. I was just too insecure to let you be." The room was silent. The chairman turned to me. "Mrs. Hartford, You're listed as the victim. Do you have a statement? I stood. Yes, I looked at Ryan, really looked at him. This man who'd promised me forever and planned my destruction, who'd made me doubt my own sanity, who'd tried to take my daughter. You're right, I said quietly. I'll never forgive you. Not because I'm holding a grudge, but because forgiveness implies what you did was forgivable. It wasn't. Ryan's face remained neutral. But I also want you to know, I'm grateful because you showed me exactly who I am, what I'm capable of, what I refuse to tolerate. I turned to the board. I don't support his parole. He's dangerous. Not because he's violent, because he's smart enough to make people believe his lies. And I don't think 8 years is enough time to unlearn a lifetime of manipulation. The board denied his parole. Ryan would serve his full sentence. As I left the building, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not forgiveness, but pity for a man so empty inside that he tried to fill himself by destroying someone else. I drove home to Emma, made her dinner, read her a story about a brave girl who slayed dragons. And I didn't think about Ryan Hartford again. Emma was 10 when she asked about her father. We were making breakfast, pancakes, Saturday morning ritual. Mom, why don't I have a dad? I'd been expecting this question for years, had prepared answers, had practiced staying calm. You do have a dad, he's just not in our lives. Why not? I flip onto pancake, bought myself 5 seconds. Because he hurt me, and I needed to keep us both safe. Did he hit you? No, it was a different kind of hurt. He tried to take away the things that made me strong. My career, my money, my confidence. Emma was quiet for a moment. Is he in jail? He was. He got out last year. Are you scared he'll come back? I looked at my daughter, 10 years old, sharp as a knife, fearless because I'd taught her to be. No, because I'm not the same person I was when I met him. And you know what the best part is? What? Neither are you. You grew up knowing your mom could handle anything, that we didn't need anyone else to be a family. That's worth more than having a dad who would have hurt us. Emma nodded, took a bite of pancake. Mom? Yeah? I'm glad it's just us. Me too, kiddo. Me too. The speaking invitations had never stopped. Corporate women's groups, domestic violence conferences, law school ethics panels. They all wanted to hear the story, wanted to know how I'd survived, how I'd fought back, how I'd won. I said yes to most of them, not for the money anymore, for the conversations after. The women who'd pull me aside and whisper, that happened to me too. At a conference in Chicago, a woman in her 50s approached me. My husband's been pressuring me to sign a postnup, she said. Says it's just to protect the business, but something feels wrong. Trust that feeling, I said. Get your own lawyer, read every word. If he pressures you, that's your answer right there. She nodded. Thank you. I needed to hear that from someone who'd survived. You'll survive too, one way or another. 6 months later, she emailed me. She'd refused to sign. Her husband had filed for divorce, and she'd hired a forensic accountant who'd uncovered millions in hidden assets. I'm going to be okay, she wrote, because you taught me to trust myself. That's what the work had become, not just my story, a roadmap for other women. Sometimes people asked if I'd ever date again, if Emma needed a father figure, if I was lonely. The answer was always the same. I wasn't looking, didn't need to be. Emma and I were complete as we were. Besides, I'd learned something important. Better alone than with someone who makes you small. Ryan tried to contact me after his release. Email, blocked. Phone call, blocked. Letter to my publisher. Returned unopened. Finally, he showed up at Columbia while I was teaching. Campus security called me. There's a Ryan Hartford here to see you. Should we let him in? No, escort him off campus. If he comes back, call the police. I'd expected him to try. Narcissists always do. One final attempt to control the narrative, to explain, to manipulate. But I was done giving him opportunities. That night, I drafted a statement through my lawyer. Simple, clear. Ryan Hartford is not welcome in my life or my daughter's life. Any further contact will be considered harassment and will be reported to authorities. He didn't try again. Some endings don't need closure. They just need to end. Emma's high school graduation was on a perfect June day, 13 years after I'd found Ryan's phone on Thanksgiving. 13 years of rebuilding, fighting, surviving. She walked across that stage in her cap and gown, and I cried like an idiot. Elena sat beside me. "You did good, Mama." "We did good," I said, because she'd been there too. Through all of it, Emma had been accepted to Columbia, full scholarship, planning to study journalism. "I want to tell stories like you, Mom," she'd said when the acceptance letter came. "Stories that matter. Just make sure you read all your contracts first," I'd told her. She'd laughed. Obviously. That evening, just the two of us in our apartment, Emma asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Are you glad you left him?" I'd never lied to her, or wasn't going to start now. "I'm glad I survived him. I'm glad I have you, but I wish I'd never met him in the first place." "But then you wouldn't have me." "True, so I guess I'm glad for the ending, even if the middle sucked." She smiled. "That's very philosophical, Mom." I've had 13 years to think about it. We sat on the couch the same way we had when she was little, her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," I said. "For getting into Columbia?" "For being exactly who you are. Brave, smart, kind. Everything I hoped you'd be." "I learned from the best." I kissed the top of her head. We learned together. The next morning I opened my laptop, started writing. Not a memoir this time. Fiction. A story about a woman who loses everything and discovers she never needed it in the first place. Emma came into my office. "Writing again?" "Always." "Good. The world needs more stories about women who don't need saving." She left for her graduation party. I kept writing, because that's what survivors do. We tell our stories. We warn the next generation. We turn our pain into something useful. I'd lost a penthouse, a marriage, millions of dollars, years of my life. But I'd gained something worth more. I'd gained myself back. 5 years later, Emma graduated Columbia with honors, started working at the Washington Post, following in Elena's footsteps. Her first major investigation exposed financial fraud at a tech startup. The CEO was arrested. When I called to congratulate her, she laughed. "Like mother, like daughter." "Just be careful," I said. "These cases can get ugly." "I know. You taught me that. You also taught me they're worth it." I hung up and looked around my apartment. The same Brooklyn place we'd moved to when Emma was a baby. I could afford something bigger now. Something nicer. But this was home. This was where we'd survived. Where we'd rebuilt. Some people asked if I regretted selling the penthouse. If I missed the life I'd had before Ryan. The answer was always no. Because that life had been a trap disguised as privilege. The penthouse had been full of ghosts, my parents' memories, yes, but also Ryan's plans for my destruction. This apartment? This was mine. Earned. Chosen. Free. I attended Ryan's funeral when he died at 62. Heart attack, stress-related. The service was small, his mother. A few former colleagues who hadn't completely abandoned him. Vanessa Pierce, surprisingly. No one from Safeguard, no one from his startup days. Everyone he'd betrayed had moved on. I stood in the back, didn't speak, didn't cry. Afterward, Vanessa approached me. She looked older, wiser. "Why did you come?" she asked. "To make sure it was real," I said. "To know that chapter is finally closed." "Are you glad he's dead?" I thought about that. I'm glad I don't have to worry about him anymore. That Emma doesn't have to worry. But no, I'm not glad. I'm just relieved. Vanessa nodded. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for everything I was part of." "I know, you testified. That mattered." "Did it? You helped send him to prison. You showed other women they could fight back." "Yeah, it mattered." That night I updated my will. Everything to Emma, the book royalties, the investments, the small but real fortune I'd built from nothing. But also the documents, all of them. The recordings, the emails, the evidence I'd gathered that Thanksgiving night. "For Emma Hartford," I wrote in the instructions, "in case she ever needs proof that her mother fought for her, that she was worth fighting for. That no one, not even the person who's supposed to love you most, has the right to make you small." I sealed the envelope, put it in my safe deposit box. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my couch, looked at the photos on my wall. Emma as a baby, Emma at kindergarten, Emma at Columbia, Emma at her new job. Just the two of us. In every photo. Perfect. People ask me if I won. The answer is complicated. Ryan went to prison. I got justice. I wrote a bestseller. I rebuilt my career. I raised an incredible daughter. But I also spent years in legal battles. Lost my inheritance. Lost my family home. Lost the life I'd imagined. So did I win? Depends on how you measure victory. If winning means getting everything you thought you wanted, then no. But if winning means surviving with your dignity intact, if it means raising a daughter who'll never sign a document she doesn't read, if it means turning trauma into purpose, then yeah, I won. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's building a life they can't touch. It's becoming someone they can't hurt anymore. Ryan tried to make me disappear. Instead, I told my story so loudly that millions of people heard it. He tried to take my daughter. Instead, I raised her to be everything he feared. Strong, independent, fearless. He tried to take my voice. Instead, I taught a generation of journalists how to use theirs. So here's what I learned in those 72 hours between Thanksgiving and vanishing. Trust your instincts. They're usually right. Read the fine print. Every word matters. Keep your own money. Always. Document everything. You'll need it. Find people who believe you. They're worth more than any trust fund. And most importantly, your worth isn't measured by what you have. It's measured by what you refuse to give up. I lost a penalties worth $15 million, but I kept the thing that mattered most. I kept myself. 20 years after that Thanksgiving. Emma calls me. Mom, I'm writing an article about financial abuse in tech marriages. Could I interview you? I smile. Always. One question. If you could go back and change anything, would you? I think about Ryan forgetting his phone, about reading those messages, about the chain of events that destroyed my comfortable life and gave me a real one. No, I say, not a thing. Not even meeting him in the first place? Then I wouldn't have you, and you're the only perfect thing that came from that marriage. She's quiet for a moment. Thanks, Mom, for surviving, for showing me how. You would have figured it out on your own. You're tougher than I ever was. I learned from you. After we hang up, I sit at my desk. Look out the window at Brooklyn. 20 years in this apartment, 20 years of peace. My phone buzzes. Elena. Dinner this weekend? I'm bringing the new girlfriend. Perfect. Emma will be there too. Family. Not the one I was born into, not the one I married into, the one I chose, the one that chose me back. They say marriage is about trust. I trusted everything. That was my first mistake. But my second choice? That was all mine. I chose to leave, to fight, to survive, to thrive. And in the end, that's all any of us can do. Make better choices after the first mistake. And never, ever forget, you're stronger than anyone who tries to make you weak.